This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com, and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, what's up with Fox News? With us this evening and back by popular demand, Peter Barry Chowka, an investigative reporter. Peter, welcome back to the Glazov Gang.
Thank you very much, Jamie.
So, more interesting developments at Fox News. Maybe interesting is not the perfect word. Now, Dobbs has been removed. There's a lot to say here, but we can begin with saying that Dobbs, one could argue, was a bit pro-Trump. Is this connected? Is it not connected? A lot of things have been happening at Fox News. A lot of conservatives are critical of Fox News, but there's still, in my opinion, a lot of heroes at Fox News, a lot of great people at Fox News, in terms of commentary especially. I mean, Hannity, Tucker, Laura, still great people. What do you make of it all, Peter? You have quite a background in analyzing media.
Yes, indeed. I started analyzing media when I was a child. I was a media nerd at that point. And just a little history before we get into Fox News today and tomorrow. Until 1996, October, when Fox News started on the scene, that's almost 25 years ago, it was dominated, cable news was dominated by CNN, which had been on since 1980, left of center, and MSNBC came on in July of 1996, a joint operation of Microsoft and NBC. Microsoft, by the way, has nothing to do with MSNBC now, left of center, as well as all of the Alphabet Channel news divisions, ABC, NBC, CBS, PBS, left of center. So Fox News was the first and only one to be sympathetic to conservatives while being fair and balanced and looking at both sides. Their slogan used to be, "We report, you decide." It was a complete innovation. So for about almost 20 years, starting in 2001, Fox News became the most watched cable news channel. It eclipsed both CNN and MSNBC through the various ups and downs over the years. Basically conservative, although in my opinion, in the last 4 years, more conservative than ever before. And I've got the tapes to prove it because I've been recording media for the last 40 years on video, so I can refer to it. In the past, Fox News had hosts like Bill O'Reilly, who insisted he was not a conservative. Paula Zahn from CBS had a primetime show. Greta Van Susteren had a primetime show. When she left Fox News, she went over to MSNBC. So starting 4 years ago now, Fox intensified its primetime opinion shows with Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity, and Laura Ingraham, and they repeated on the West Coast. So that's 6 hours of solid conservative credentials in prime time. The news department, which is separate from the opinion section at Fox, has always been a bit more middle of the road, but that's fine. That's mainstream news. We have to keep in mind that Fox News Channel is a mainstream news outlet. It is not an opinion outlet. If people want conservative opinion and nothing but, they can go now to OAN or Newsmax. But Fox is on every cable and satellite distributor in the United States and in some cases internationally. So they have to play the game. They have to be mainstream, which means covering both sides. But clearly, if you watch Fox News, and many of the critics don't apparently, if you watch Fox News, you see a lot of excellent traditional conservative patriotic programming, in my opinion.
Thank you, Peter. So look, absolutely, thank God for Fox. And as we said, some great people there telling the truth. Tucker, like we have said, Hannity, Laura, etc., Judge Jeanine, Mark Levine. But there's some pressures going on, one could argue. So let's begin with those pressures, and maybe there's truth to it or not. What do you think is going on with the Dobbs thing?
Well, that's complicated because it also involves a legal case. You know, Fox News, 3 of the hosts, including Dobbs, who is now separated from Fox News, and Rudy Giuliani and one other individual have been sued by one of the companies that alleges that they were maligned or libel in the broadcasts and what was said on Fox News during the challenges to the election 2020 results. So we're going to have to see how that plays out. But the reports I read and that I've heard through my sources are that Lou Dobbs was ready to be separated from Fox News or Fox Business, where he actually had his main show, Fox Business Channel, before the lawsuit was filed on a week ago today, as we're recording, Thursday. So, meanwhile, the other two individuals, Jeanine Pirro and who's the third? I'm forgetting right now, are still ensconced at Fox News. So I don't think it was a response of the Fox management to that lawsuit. And we will see how that plays out. I mean, I'm not a legal expert. The original lawsuit is hundreds of pages, so I will leave that to the attorneys and the courts.
Right.
Although Fox did file a defensive brief, which they sent me earlier this week. It's much shorter, 20 pages. So they are making their case. We will see what happens. Other people, as you note, have criticized, it's like they will cherry pick one incident or one event and claim that that defines Fox News. So on one occasion, a discussion, a point that Newt Gingrich was trying to raise was apparently shut down by Harris Faulkner and one other individual on the Outnumbered show. Meanwhile, George Soros and what he's up to in what we would agree is a bad way has been covered on Fox News at length on Tucker Carlson's program, Hannity's program, the Fox and Friends morning program. And if you go to foxnews.com, the website, there is an area. If you search George Soros, there's an area listing articles and videos about George Soros, critical, that have been on Fox News. So other allegations are made, Jamie, like people will say, well, Disney's running Fox News. Disney has nothing to do with Fox News. They'll say the Murdoch boys, both of the sons of Rupert Murdoch, are running Fox News. Wrong again. One of the sons works with Fox News. He's a CEO, but he's the more conservative son. Or they'll say Paul Ryan is on the board of directors of the Fox Corporation, so he's running the show. That's ridiculous. One member on a board of directors does not run the show. And by the way, this breaking news, just yesterday I received the news in a news release from Fox News that Suzanne Scott, who is in charge of Fox News, and she has her hands on the programming, and she's conservative. She's been there for 25 years. She worked with Roger Ailes, who was the genius who basically made Fox News along with Rupert Murdoch. Her contract has been extended, a multi-year contract, and she is the one who solidified the hardcore conservative opinion prime time schedule. And I'll close with this at this moment. It came out this week that another new program is premiering in post-prime time on Fox News, the Greg Gutfeld show. And Gutfeld is a comedic conservative. He's a brilliant man and writer. His show is now going 5 nights a week at 11 p.m. Eastern on Fox News, replacing Fox News at Night, the news show. So another opinion show is coming on in the evening hours, which makes 5 hours of opinion shows now, because they added another one a month ago called Fox News Primetime. They're currently trying out hosts at that. It's on at 7 p.m. Eastern. So they've moved 2 news shows out of pre and post prime time, and they've added conservative opinion shows. So my subtitle to this discussion we're having, what's up with Fox News, I'd say they're moving right, and maybe they never left.
Very interesting. Well, look, I still will say that when Newt Gingrich was on that show with Fox News anchor Harris Faulkner, and he was bringing up George Soros and his money and how it's interconnected with letting their criminals run wild, just out of the blue, she just, says it's not necessary to bring Soros into this discussion. And I would just say that that's very telling. And it would be very interesting where that comes from and why. And I guess we can leave it at that unless you want to say something.
Just add something there, Jamie, because you probably know that in live television, and Fox is now live 21 hours a day, you have directors and producers working on each show. So oftentimes it's up to the producer or director of that particular show where the discussion is going to go. So whoever was on the board that night or that day might have said, hey, let's close this down, but it's not necessarily company policy. Now, I'm not an defender of Fox News to the end. I like to call the shots and say, and of the 100 or so articles I've written about cable news for American Thinker in the last 4 years, many of them about Fox News, many of them have been very, very critical. When I think Fox deserves criticism, I let them have it. For example, once I called for the removal of Juan Williams after his spirited defense of the Honorable Louis Farrakhan. So I have been known to be very, very critical of Fox News. And when I write those articles, I hear from the Fox News PR department because they're not happy with me. So I am in no way a shill for Fox News.
No, of course.
But as I've said in some of my articles, in defense of Fox News, be careful. You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater in this case, because a lot of the people who are not only on the left, but now some on the conservative right criticizing Fox News and saying, it shouldn't be watched, we should boycott it. Well, if Fox News didn't exist in the mainstream media, we would have nothing there now, Jamie, absolutely nothing.
Well, of course. And again, I'm just bringing up some of the facts in terms of, let's say, the George Soros thing. We'll bring up some other stuff. It's a little bit
bringing up, absolutely.
For me, it's a bit curious why that happened. Again, I will repeat, any station that has Tucker Carlson and Hannity and Mark Levine and Laura and Judge Jeanine. Yeah, I mean...
Pete Hegseth.
Right. Jesse Waters. Jesse Waters. Yeah.
Greg Jarrett, David Webb, Tammy Bruce. I could name 30 or 40 off the top of my head. I won't take the time, but, they are really, really great.
Yeah, and thank God for a network that has these wonderful truth tellers. But look, let's bring up what happened to Judge Jeanine when she dared to enter the waters of Sharia law. And you remember that incident, and she got penalized for that.
We were happy when she returned after a 1-week recess.
Yeah, and so just let me say, I think look, we know that people have to play the game. We know that there's pressures in our society. We know the left has succeeded in controlling and molding the boundaries of permitted discourse on many levels. The left has won on many levels, including on the issue of the real sources of jihad. And so at Fox News, I'm not completely surprised that we don't really see Bridget Gabriel on there as much as we used to. Judge Jeanine getting penalized for the things she said in connection to Sharia law. Where did Pamela Geller go? Robert Spencer. I think he was on maybe a couple times in the recent past, but not a regular guest. I think that there's an issue with Islam at Fox News in terms of a no-go zone.
You may have a very valid point there. And, another area which... well, actually, lately it's been broached on some of the major opinion shows, and that is the validity of vaccinations, and in particular the COVID-19 vaccine. Of course, the other channels and the other mainstream media will never question vaccinations. And it was just earlier today that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. got thrown off Instagram because Instagram didn't like his association's views on the COVID-19 vaccine. So that's another third rail which cannot be touched. But increasingly, Fox is questioning the vaccine, so at least they're looking at that. But, in general, to question big medicine, the medical industrial complex, as I call it, is largely a no-go zone, including too often, I would have to say, on Fox News. So they have to play the game. There are a lot of moving parts. There are hundreds, if not more, people who work at Fox News, probably thousands, and the Fox Corporation. And they're constantly threading the needle. But again, in my opinion, they hit the mark more often than not. And plus, Jamie, like this platform that we're communicating on now is an excellent example of the new media or the alternative media. And there's lots of that around. And I'm not advising that people just watch Fox News and nothing else. I'm advising that they use that as a complement if they are so inclined and want to pay for cable or satellite service. use it as a complement to the kinds of things we're doing here on the internet, the new media, the alternative media, the sincere, intelligent conservative media, and then the truth will out, hopefully.
Yeah, there were a lot of conservatives that were upset with Fox's coverage of the election in terms of calling some of the states a bit too early for the Dems. Do you think anything was there, or they were just doing what they thought was correct?
Well, the individual who was most responsible for that call, which was about the state of Arizona, which actually was a correct call, if you believe the results of the election, Arizona was eventually certified for Biden. And Fox called it on election night ahead of everybody else, for which they got a lot of grief from the conservative right. But the individual who was responsible for that has also left Fox News, not of his choice. So it seems to me that the signs are, especially, by the way, perhaps inspired by a ratings decline, which has hit Fox News heavily since the election. And in fact, this very week, impeachment 2 week, Fox News is coming in a poor third, although that's probably to be expected with the nature of the news this week. But Fox News isn't doing very well in the ratings right now, and I think they're trying to recover. And if you look at Fox News and the promotional ads that they run on behalf of their own channel, they are touting the fact that they are speaking the truth that nobody else will, and they have their conservative opinion hosts doing these ads. So I think they're trying to move again more to the right, in my opinion.
Well, look, when we go to CNN and MSNBC, sometimes I feel like I'm watching some kind of Maoist cultural revolution propaganda film, or one of those North Korean or Stalinist propaganda films. So,
Isn't it? You know what I think of, Jamie, when I think of having to watch CNN or MSNBC, as I have to do occasionally to see what the other camp is brewing there. I imagine children, poverty-stricken children in a third world country like Venezuela, going through the garbage dump looking for something. And that's what I feel like, except I never find it when I'm looking at CNN. It really is painful and aggravating, and I'm sure it raises my blood pressure. So I do it as little as I need to.
absolutely. And why I brought it up was, when we go to Fox News, we thank the Lord. So we end on this note, that apart from maybe some of the things we said and some of the downfalls and et cetera, any station that has such a wonderful person like Tucker Carlson or Laura Ingraham or Sean Hannity, we got to thank the Lord that a station like this still exists. 30 seconds left. Your final words of wisdom on this, Peter?
Yeah, Tucker Carlson, he's doing some of the best work I've ever seen on TV, anywhere, anytime, and they're really going after him now. This very week, the heat is on him again to actually take him off the air or to destroy his sponsor base. But yes, I just hope that people have an open mind with this. Many of the critics admit they haven't watched Fox News for years, so I don't think that's a fair person to criticize, but just check it out and continue to access programs like this online to get maybe closer to truth.
Peter Chowka, always a pleasure to have you on the Glazov Gang.
Thank you again, Jamie.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us tonight. We'll see you soon. Good night.